Welcome everyone to another episode of Escaping the Echo Chamber. And today we have a wonderful guest here, Charles Handler. And I tell you a little bit of a story how I got to know Charles. Charles wrote a wonderful article in Kevin Wheeler's newsletter where I picked up on this article and thought it was brilliant. And we exchanged a little bit back and forth. And then I became a guest in his podcast. So now I need to return the favor and say, welcome, Charles, to our podcast. And please introduce yourself quickly to the people who might not know you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is awesome. I always love the cross-national, shows as well. It's really nice. A little bit of a refreshing thing. So, I am an organizational psychologist. I've been practicing, 30 years, and I specialize in assessment tools, but really I take a much more holistic approach. Hiring is not just one test or assessment. It's the result of an entire process. And we have to think about it, that way. I have done a lot of things in my career, and I kind of knit together a lot of threads that I think make me a little unique. But to cut to really the most relevant here, I've advised enterprise companies for a long time on their assessment decision making, on their programs and strategy. I have advised them on, acquiring vendors. I've also worked with a lot of vendors as an industry analyst for assessment industry, so I kind of know both sides of it. I've been heavily immersed in the tech side. I worked for the first company putting tests online, 25 years ago. And I'm now, of course, working with AI quite a bit and really integrating that into my knowledge, background in psychometrics, background in legal, defensibility, and ethics. So I have all those things, and I really enjoy helping people make good decisions because these tools can be very effective when used correctly and really thought through, and very ineffective, if not detrimental, if not. So,
Yeah, 100%. And I just heard from the beginning that you were in HR Tech in Las Vegas.
yeah,
What did you pick up there? Tell us a little bit about it.
fatigue. That's part of it. It's very overwhelming, to be honest with you. I just roam the expo. There's maybe 1,000 vendors in there. You can learn a lot that way. I'm still processing. I'm using ChatGPT to crunch all the vendor exhibitor lists and find some trends. It's taken me a little time, but overall, I think when we start, and this kind of ties into my philosophies anyway. Of course, AI was everywhere. I don't think anybody displaying there that was doing any kind of hiring or employee development really didn't mention AI. So it's almost like perfunctory. It's almost like assumed. Of course, now agents, that every year it's kind of the next wave. So now we're talking about agents. And as we get into these layers, what is AI? How does it work? How are people using it? Is it bullshit? Now you have agents within that. How are people using agents? Is that bullshit? What is an agent? Right? It's going to continue constantly with that. So it requires a continual education and sensing and really, looking at what's out there. And again, doing kind of the bullshit detection like you all do. But when it comes to hiring and assessment, I'm seeing trends of, these are again bigger things we'll talk about. First of all, the barriers to entry to any kind of business really now that's a tech business are low, right? And in the startup pavilion there's a lot of companies purporting to do the exact same thing, and they probably haven't had to do a lot. I don't want to trivialize that. I know how hard it is to start a company, but the differentiation, especially around, avatar driven interviews, that's one of these things that just like video interviews, everybody's doing it. It's hard to differentiate. The barriers are low. And the biggest thing, and as we talk about ethics and stuff through this, conversation, is the fact that I think assessment proper is starting to be replaced a little bit. I actually use the term predictive hiring now instead of assessment, because it's all doing the same thing. Anytime you collect data of signal from a person to try and match them to an opportunity or a specific thing, that's prediction, and assessments have done that. But a lot of other things do it too. But really now what you see is these talent intelligence tools, the matching tools, they're driven by AI, by really natural language processing, and now generative AI helping refine that in terms of matching, giving a match score, kind of thing. And that's on the sourcing side, and on the evaluation side, usually at the top of the funnel. Those things have to be really looked at closely, and there's a decent number. Anybody who's an ATS or talent management platform is typically having that. Then there's bolt-ons that do that, and kind of proper assessment companies are not really doing that, right? So there's a need, a really great need, to be critical of those things or to use them correctly. They may have or they do have a use case. So that's my thing. Overwhelming, lots of vendors, tons of AI, tons of agents, some stuff good, some stuff bad. And assessment itself is starting to kind of get dovetailed, absorbed, whatever, into some bigger things that are talking about the same result.
That's fascinating, actually, Charles. So I just wanted to pick up on a point that you made there, and we talked about it in the green room prior to recording. If you're like a head of TA or head of people sitting in your seat today, just your description of obviously the event you went to can be incredibly overwhelming. So
Yeah.
I would venture that most leads in people and talent have a mandate from the C-suite to do with AI, right? Simple as that. They may have a mandate and or definitely some signposting and direction that's where they want that kind of people and talent function to start leaning
Right.
towards and exploring.
Right.
Now you're in a position where you're advising people in terms of their approach. What are the first kind of 1, 2, 3 ABC steps that you start, in your advisory approach when you encounter somebody who's just like, Charles, I ain't got a clue where to start. I don't even know where we start.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So and I'm going to answer that, but I also want to back up a second and just talk a little bit about, the mandate for AI, et cetera. It's important. I have this, I have this saying I made up, about AI. Who's in charge here, right? Is the AI in charge or the people in charge? Because there's a lot of people thinking AI is the solution. FOMO, AI FOMO. We have to put this in there. It's going to be the best thing ever. Um, and really, what I think is, now the real focus is on efficiency more than accuracy, I think. And it's debatable. I've read a lot that says, are we even getting efficiency out of this? I don't really know. But I know you don't have a lot of efficiency around the old practices either. So we're looking for something to get an advantage always. And I'll be honest, in my travels, I work with a lot of very traditional stuff. A lot of companies with, well thought out assessment programs are not necessarily saying we got to use AI here, we got to use AI here. There's a use case for it, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But to prepare for this, you know, for me, I do discovery, right? So I'm going to talk to the company, I'm going to talk to leadership and the line, the business, people owning the business and technology, kind of holistically, and say, all right, what are we trying to accomplish here? What's your end goal, right? And what are you doing now? And what's this future state that you want to create? And the answer to that is different a lot of times. So you really react to that. There is a lot of education at the outset, right? Most of the time when I come in, there's not someone who does what I do within the company. Although interestingly enough, the field is growing a lot, and now a lot of the enterprise companies I used to, you know, would consult to have internal people who do what I do, which I think is great. That really helps out. But I typically, in selecting stuff, because if you have an internal person, you're not going to say I'm clueless, I don't know what's going on. So there's a lot of education, and there's a lot of bedrock foundation of, if we're trying to predict success, which we are, what does that mean? How do we do that? And I have a model I've used for a long time. It's immutable. It doesn't matter if it's AI or not, really. And it doesn't matter from an ethics or compliance really standpoint in some sense, and I'll explain that. I mean, uh, that's not a total. I feel bad saying that, but because we always have to be on the lookout. But in general, there's 4 steps, and I educate people to these 4 steps. Step number 1 is define what it is that you want to measure. What does this job entail, or what's the future state of skills that you want, etc.? Objectively define that. Everybody needs to understand what that is. So you study the job, you study the context, and you come up with a model. Then you have to choose highly relevant and effective measurement methods, which are the assessments or whatever you're predicting, right? So you have to make sure those are aligned. You can have the best assessment in the world. It's so good, for certain situations. If you use it wrong, if I try to use a wrench to drive in a nail, that's not very effective, right? I'm probably going to be frustrated. So you have to do that, right? Then you have to have a very good decision making or evaluation process for that, right? You have to be able to really look at how are we using this data? How effective is that? So there's a curation of data there as well through this loop. It's critical. A lot of companies don't do that either. And it's AI, you hear this a lot, but regular, predictive stuff too. If you don't measure how well it's working to hold it accountable, then how the hell, why are you even doing this? But it takes a lot of extra effort to do that because you have to collect and curate the data. And then from the step 4, from what you learn here is, rinse and repeat, refine what it is you're doing based on the results so that you're basically evolving it forward based on data and evidence. So I work on really helping people understand that, and then okay, let's dig into each piece of that process and make sure it's aligned. That's the first piece. uh, the other piece is learning the business. So many times I think people who do what I do, they come in and they just say, okay, we got tests, what's the job? There's a practical context of the business that creates boundaries to what you're doing and requires you to be creative and flexible. Companies may have limitations that, oh shit, my training says you have to do this step. Well, company has limitations. That's what I love about it. You got to be creative and work to get the end result. So you have to understand those limitations, and you have to form relationships and trust with the stakeholders too by listening to them. So I do a lot of interviews up front. So you set the stage that way instead of just zooming in. And again, if someone comes to me and says we have to put an AI solution in, that's where we're at. I would question that and say, really? Okay, well let's take a look at all the things in that model. What are you trying to do? And see, is AI based stuff one alternative? Sure, but don't lead with that necessarily. So
Yeah, it's fascinating. But I think that's a really logical process of discovery. And then you land at a point where you're intentionally making an informed decision to take action or activity. But to your point around obviously Vegas and where you encountered so many sales pitches and the sales, almost the AI hype narrative of production gains, efficiency gains, to some individuals that perhaps think they don't have the quote unquote time to go through that kind of logical discovery process, they might be like, well, it's a productivity game. Why would I not
yeah.
double down on that? That's
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, that seems like common sense to me.
Yeah.
But in that moment, what would your kind of advice be before they kind of double down on that? Because it like you say that logically the sales pitch seems completely palatable. It's like productivity gains, AI led solution. Why would I not buy that? What
Yeah.
would you? How would you counter that slightly?
Yeah. I would say, well, what kind of giveaway are you given here? Is it a water bottle, a stuffed animal? You know, that says a lot. I'm just joking, but they're always giving away all kinds of great stuff. So,
Yeah.
And I refuse to wear any T-shirts from any things that I don't choose. I'm very picky about my T-shirts. They give away a lot of T-shirts. I don't want it to say HR on it, quite honestly, or anything. Um, so I've tracked this market for a really long time. In fact, you know, I did some work with Kevin Wheeler. Probably he's kind of a mentor to me, probably 25 years ago, and some other IOs at that point in separate projects. But back in 2000, I did my first buyer's guide. There were 28 vendors in there. That's all I could scrape up, right? I've done it over time, over the last, you know, every probably 5 or 6 years. 2021, I had 285 because I did expand it to, are you video interviewing? Are you some kind of matching, you know, tools? Well, I've been trying to get it, you know, done again. I'm up over 400 now. So every day and almost every week, let's say, new people are going into that spreadsheet of, oh, I got to investigate these people. I made a market classification system where I have two pieces that help you understand what do these people actually do, because that's what I'm going to come back to. What do these people actually effing do? Because and when I sit on RFPs, a lot of times a company will say, okay, well, we did our research and we found these 4 vendors. And I'm looking at that going, these people don't even do close to what it is that you're looking for, right? And so it's understanding, what do you do? And there's some companies out there that it's very hard to answer that question other than saying, well, we give you productivity, we give you these gains. And you see their pitches and everything. And, you know, for me, when I'm looking at this, not only can I quickly classify what people do, I have kind of a gift for that, you know, I feel like, because I've been doing it a very long time. Um, but then I look to say, okay, you know, how are they doing this? And the assessment world, immediately it's, okay, where's your technical report? Do you have any IO psychologists doing this? Who are your advisors? You know, let me dig into the science a little bit around it. That tends to be a hard stop a lot of times. And now, as vendors are growing more and more, it's still kind of it is growing to be a hard stop. You have a lot of people. This is very common, I think, is, hey, I was very successful in another business. Hiring was hard. Now I sold that business or did whatever, and I get to move on, and I want to solve hiring. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a hiring technology company. And I know how it goes because I was a good hirer and I had a good team around me and I brought some of those people in or whatever. And so now we're going to solve that problem. Everybody's solving that problem, right? And a lot of times there's no real, okay, we need somebody who actually knows the science of this. AI can do a lot. I mean, it's starting, look, I use it every day, and I'm working with a startup where we're using AI to build assessments. Absolutely. But you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that you like there's other people doing that without the benefit of what we do. And you know, I'll say, to me, when you start thinking about the use of AI in this stuff, I put it in 2 distinct categories, right? Category number 1 is you're using the AI to help you do what you know how to do to build kind of things and even enhance those things. So, you know, one of the first things when ChatGPT first came out, people who do what I do were like, oh, we don't have to sit there and write these behavioral anchors for every level of a job. You know, expert, average, whatever. Like, that is a tedious process. You customize them to the job, to the competencies. And, you know, it's kind of like the, I don't know, just the, you know, being in there rowing the Viking ship or whatever. It's not fun at all, really, and it's repetitive and not the best use of a good brain, you know. But it's training for us. So immediately when I threw the first behavioral anchors in this thing, and you know, came out with a meaningful result, I'm like, oh wow, this is great. So, you know, and now you can build assessments. These things know assessment very well, and then you're a human and you process that, and it doesn't go directly into your production platform or whatever. You're using it, then you're putting it into the product. That's very safe as long as a human's looking at it. It'd be good to have an expert do it. But then there's AI of, okay, this thing is building and evaluating what's going on. So now we're using a model, or we've used machine learning algorithms for a long time to do that. I would say these models are hyper giant, hyper major crazy extension of those, but they're still doing their prediction machines is a much more molecular level. I I've been calling since when it first came out there, or first became in the public usage. I call it supernatural math. Just another like thing. And I had this big philosophical argument with ChatGTP where I said, math this can be supernatural, and it said, no, supernatural, it doesn't exist. We can't define what supernatural is. And I said, well, there's something here that to me that just seems cosmic, which is not correct, but maybe it's the design plan of the eventual overlords to get us in here. I digress. That's when I talk about this, I have to talk about these things, but in general, that's where a lot of your matching comes in and your talent intelligence stuff. Well, who knows what? Oh, well, it's based on resume database and, a job description database across 15 billion jobs. And we have 100,000 skills and, all this. And the AI helps us with that. And I've seen that up close and personal. It ain't so good. And it's the output. And, there's, it's nuanced, but there's companies that say, well, we handle the entire interview. Just give us the job and we'll create the questions. We'll actually deliver the interview. We'll score the interview and we'll match a candidate or something like that. And that's a different bucket of this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's making the decisions for you or making the evaluations for you. In the startup I'm working at, our scoring is still algebra. We're creating stuff with AI, but our scoring is algebra. You could look at we transparently show you that. And that is honestly, that this is another truth, and then I'll shut up for a second. But the rules are not different. I think I already said this for AI or not. You have to do the things that are critical, and then whatever comes out, if it works, that's good, and that's important, and that can help you figure that what's going on inside is accurate, right? But you have to be able to prove that, and I think there's not a lot of proof out there for some of these more autonomous, I'll call them. I mean, that's probably a wrong word. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
Great. I think what I love a lot is your perspective, or your perspective, no, your perspective on the technology, the AI that's out there, and maybe where the shortcomings are. But how much is it also about the company and their practices, right? I think this is what you mentioned as well. And I really love here your point that you made on if you want AI, let's really double down on why and if that really makes sense if you don't know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Because that is literally what I keep on seeing, that when you also listen to the echo chambers, the bubbles, that everything that happens in the economy or to companies in general, it's AI. Like,
Yeah.
junior talent is not getting enough jobs. It's AI. People are getting laid off. It's AI.
Yeah.
We cannot hire people anymore. It must be AI, right? So and that's nonsense. So I think,
Yeah.
honestly speaking, this is something we should also maybe go down on a little bit. Like, let's assume, what would be your advice to be prepare for companies or TA leaders to become AI ready before you even go into the tooling question?
Yeah. Well, there's a maturity level. There's kind of an AI maturity um, idea that where are you in terms of your ability to actually manage this as an organization. I think of things around, do you have a chief AI officer? Do you have governance things? Do you have things that are universally important to your company for screening and evaluating solutions, right? A set of these things. And then what's your experience in the more benign thing. I mean, look, AI for supply chain, right? AI for marketing. I mean, the risk factor there ethically is almost none, and especially the more it's just helping you optimize equations for routing and like stocking and inventory. That stuff is low hanging fruit. But what kind of experience do you even have with that stuff? I think then, secondly, and this is what I've seen. I did a little interview project. It's probably completely obsolete now. In 2024, early 2024, I interviewed colleagues, mostly IO psychologists at giant global corporations who are running assessment programs about, are you using AI or not? Most of them were not. A lot of them had tried it and said, this isn't working for us. So my point is, you don't have to just dive all in right away. What about a pilot program? What about a small chunk? And that's been done with assessment and all kinds of other things. But what about a small thing to see, is this going to work for us? Why or why not? And the other thing I've seen is it's used in a very structured way as componentry AI. So in the world I've seen, so there's people who have built some multinationals. They built really good skills based hiring programs that aren't bullshit. These are long, drawn, like not drawn out, but these are carefully crafted over years, right? And starts with piloting, and they are using some AI in these. They are injecting, okay, this can help us organize our jobs, organize our skills, but we're taking our skills taxonomy. We're not just using, all the skills that this thing's bringing us. We're using its superior relational capabilities to scale stuff, right? And so you can do that, right? It doesn't have to be just the AI, AI is the thing. That's in bigger programs, but you might say, well, AI can help us with, interviewing. And okay, that, at companies where you get so many applicants, it's good to have some automation in the interviewing, honestly, because you can't really handle it other ways. So there's kind of those two things: is a spot, is a component, or are we targeting one particular problem that AI really can help us with? So again, it comes back to defining that problem, understanding what you're looking to do, and going through that same cycle, but just with caution and preparedness, right? I think that's really important. And I guess the last piece, which I kind of said with governance, is, boy, you better be evaluating this stuff based on a set of, criteria that are pretty well known. It's transparency, explainability, things about the actual way this thing is working that you want to know for sure.
Just picking up on the policy and kind of governance thread, Charles. Within your content, you do refer to specifically New York City's local law
Yeah,
144 and the EU AI Act as kind of bellwethers for
yeah.
governance and policy. And I wonder whether you advocate for global standards or more bespoke regulation.
Right, right. Well, we're going to get both. We get regulation at a lot of levels.
Hmm.
Here in the U.S., it's funny that, Law 144, nobody even talks about it anymore. It's kind of a joke, quite honestly, in terms of its enforceability, its credibility, really. But what it did was it alerted the public consciousness. Illinois had a AI like interviewing act, before that. It didn't get a lot of press, but I think it was just timely for the New York thing, and now we have Colorado has one, California. So there's a
California,
lot of
yeah.
flux around because there's lobbying, there's not necessarily litigation, but there's decision making through proper political channels for this.
Hmm.
And so none of those things are set in stone. California's, I think, is in place,
Well,
but
I've read
yeah, go
about
ahead.
that, just to interject, and
Yeah,
it kind of is, well, signed recently, 29th of September,
yeah,
requires developers of AI, powerful AI systems to publish a safety framework describing how they will assess catastrophic risk thresholds, mitigate
Right.
harms, audit and disclose safety incidents. So
Right.
that does sound stronger and actually probably more enforceable. It intrigued me because, like I say, whatever happens in the US invariably starts to filter across the pond to the UK and Europe,
I would say the other way too, that like just like GDPR, what's happening is the EU AI Act took a long time to craft. I think it's really good. It puts hiring in the highest tolerable risk category, and it has requirements, which I'm not going to claim I know every little nuance of it, but it's pretty set. But it seems like the requirements have some auditing. Vendors are now accountable. So at least in the US, the vendor's never been accountable. It's always the end user. So I say, like, you're selling guns as the vendor, which is probably not a analogy people would love, but you're selling guns, you're selling hammers. I don't know. It depends on how we're just giving it to the end user. If you go, hammer someone over the head with it, that's on you. That's not on us. So that is likely a fundamental change. And I think what will happen there is it's going to filter over to the more liberal parts of the United States, California, and things like that, and then slowly proliferate a little. You do have to look at political climate, though. And I remain always on my beliefs politically. Like I don't think it's a good idea for me to say which way I lean one or another. Not That doesn't mean because I think one way is negative or not. I just like to keep it neutral with no agenda there. But the climate is real, and the DEI initiatives here in the U.S. are being kind of downgraded as important. And so our enforcement bodies are most likely not going to be as aggressive or as present there. That's at the federal level, but you still have, state and local levels, which don't have as big a sphere of influence. So to me, it's still being formed. I think, you remember early on in the generative AI stuff where I think it was a bunch of AI leaders and business leaders got together and said, we got to stop this for 6 months or, whatever. That's funny that they would, it's conceptually maybe, but we knew that would never happen. So it's constantly evolving. It's not going to stop. And, I honestly, my thing is always the individual user company should hold themselves accountable for all this stuff. And you don't have to say, let's look at, we have to be compliant with with AI acts or whatever, but there's a core set of truths here about how you use this stuff. And if you just orient toward those, and to my point earlier about what's your maturity level as an organization, what are you doing across the board to hold yourself accountable, right? I think that to me is controllable and knowable, and even as a business unit or a leader of an individual thing who's adopting tools, I believe it's different everywhere, but you might have the freedom to use those guidelines on your own to make decisions.
Yeah, this is super interesting. I just came back from an Amsterdam event where we talked also about AI, and somebody said the European AI Act that next year is the time where you need to, I think it's mid of next year, where you need to, as a company, make sure whatever AI you have, you understand what it's doing, you prove that it's not the only decision maker, but that there's a human in the loop. And then you need to also explain your decision making process and how it works, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. So you need to have your documentation ready and your explanation ready in order to actually really use it. And I'm still a little bit worried if people can actually live up to this, because as Glenn said, I experienced this in my own company as well. Like, everybody is so excited about AI. Nobody has really a clue how to do it. And then, you want to be at the forefront of a development that seems promising, but how much is it actually giving you? Because you know that startups or scale-ups are quite messy. The processes are not aligned. The data is very fragmented. So
Mm-hmm.
how can you literally scale, right? And
Yeah.
so, and most of the time, smaller mid-sized companies are also not really good in
Right.
documentation, right?
Right.
And to the point where then the first audit happens, the second audit happens, the third audit happens, and then they get the hang of it and kind of create a notion around it. But I think honestly, both worlds are a little bit like still have a lot to do in order to really make this work. But I wanted
Yeah.
to actually talk about one another topic, which I would be really curious to pick your brain. Is you talked about this matching problem. Like
Yeah.
for me, honestly, matching is broken out of two reasons. Why? You have poor written job applications, job
Mm-hmm.
descriptions, sorry, and you have resumes that are poorly written as well. So how the heck is this going to work? Have you seen now any enhancement or advancement of something that actually really can fix the matching problem? Because I think this is really this top funnel topic. This
Yeah.
everybody is looking for this solution there.
Yeah. Well, I'm just come back to how assessments work. Validating that what the things underneath this process will are doing for you. And again, matching requires you to clearly define what the job is. So you're relying on, and it's a lot of times it's not just there's companies that do labor market data, and as that they extract here's the labels that are talked about for this job, and and then you as a whatever the technology providers often integrate these things into their product. And so then on the other side you have, okay, well, we have this kind of interpretation of resumes and such. I mean, to me, you need credible signal, right? And if you're, it's hard to do it at scale. I think that's the thing. So what can you do to understand? So the successful things I've seen might take something like that, take the output and filter it through their own model or through their own thing. So there's here's the raw material. Let's look at that and align it with what we need and how we want to do this. And that's not necessarily easy to do, but it's also taxonomy. You have to have a solid taxonomy that's meaningful, and that's a lot of what I've done is taxonomy building. So that's organizing these things. So for a startup I worked for, or with, and still do, it's internal career mobility. So we want to bring in a taxonomy, and we tried API samples with some of the providers, and the skills we got back were just very jumbled. They weren't very organized. They weren't well defined. So that's the root of the problem is they have to be organized, defined, and make logical connections. Uh, right? Then you can overlay that on a job and understand, okay, this is what this job takes. Even if it is from a job description, I think it can still be filtered, and then on the other side, you have to collect credible signal. So that is from the person. So that is how can we get this person? And that's the whole thing is scale again. And you want to not have the person have to do anything, right? To do this directly. They just use what they've already got. And in that case, again, there can be some filtering, but there can also be the answer these questions, right? Which a lot of people then view differently and view as more of a drag on things, et cetera. And say candidates, I always say no one likes taking tests, right? And so companies, especially in times where they're competing, uh, there's not a lot of job seekers out there. We don't want people to bail out of our process. I always say if you're not willing to if someone's not willing to spend 15 minutes telling you about themselves, do you want to hire them anyway? Like, really, honestly, do you? And but you do run into something where now the job market is so hard. People have to apply to 30, 40, 100 jobs. So I can imagine, taking these assessments a lot of times is difficult for them to do. I think credentialing and badging is a really good solution to
Mhm.
this, which is floated around for a long time. But being able to, over the course of your even education and career, collect evidence that you have a certain skill, credible evidence. Think about it this way. It's like a lock in a key or something, right? So you understand the person as the receiver, you understand the job as kind of the signal, whatever, right? So you're basically connecting two things very closely because there's not a lot of subjectivity around it. You know what the job is, you know what this person has, do they fit together? And that can be done digitally through evidence-based stuff. That ain't happening tomorrow. That's going to take a long time. But to me, that's what it's all about. It's about credibly understanding both sides of the equation, and then you can make a great match. And I I don't think that all these things are horrible and none of them work. I think it's just about, to your point of what are we doing here, and we don't know where to start. Well, start with looking at the big picture and seeing how could we integrate the best of what this has in a way that we're overseeing and curating some of it, right? Instead of just saying this is the only thing we're using, this is it. So.
Great. Well, prior to the show, Charles, I asked ChatGPT to create a couple of questions that I should ask you.
Oh, cool.
And I looked at a couple of them and I was like, no, we're going to cover those anyway. But this one I thought was kind of fun. And it classed it as future casting. It says, Charles speculates about holographic assessments, digital humans, and agentic AI. Consider asking him which of these trends he sees as most plausible in the next 5 years and which he thinks are mere hype.
Right.
And I thought, well, that's a good place to start.
Well, I'm going to say agentic AI, but it's both. It's plausible and hype. This depends on what you're doing. What I think, and I even see like somewhere in Perplexity, which I use all the time, they have these templates, and they have a hiring template, a hiring agent template. And the example is, hire me this kind of a developer. I only want to hire the best developer. And it goes through this whole searching on the web process of only people who've worked for marquee companies and had education in marquee universities and, had these successes. And it put them it was a very, very niche job, but it put them in a ranked order of these are the people you need to go look at. And I think it's Oracle. There's a lot of Salesforce. A lot of companies are going to, our entire thing is going to be agent based, and we're going to help you accomplish things at scale by just sending someone off to do something for you. And in that case, I don't think it's far off until we have these things that a recruiter can just say, go find me this person, screen them, and bring them back to me. And, maybe they make the entire hire in the future. I think there's still going to be a human point of contact, but to me, that is already starting to happen. And I think that will happen more. And I think a lot of people will use it. You have to also remember that 90% of the companies in the US are under 100 people. So, these things are going to become very easily available, even probably within a platform like Perplexity. You can already do something like that. So, if you're a little bit savvy, even as a small company, you're still using this more so than I think, IBM is going to start letting everybody be hired by an agent. But to me, that's it. Now, people are also confusing, and this is where hype comes in. Agentic, people are calling agentic AI where you just have multiple models that are talking to one another and giving you an output. That is not the same as giving it agency, giving it its own ability to go out there and do something for you and bring you back the results in a cycle using multiple different points of data and stuff. So there's differences. And that's the hype a little, saying that's agentic AI that's really going to solve all these problems. People have been doing that with like LangChain and stuff for a while, I think. But the other is going to happen, whether you like it or not. That's going to happen. Do you agree? I mean, you guys are in the same space as me. What do you think about it?
As in kind of future casting in terms
as
of
in,
what we...
Well, even more specific, do you think that when and how do you think we might end up seeing people actually hiring just off an agent that they go send to, finish something.
I think it's plausible. I don't think it's definitely, to your point, it's definitely not in the very, very
Mm-hmm.
near future, because we're talking about, I mean, we're talking at that point about multiple data points when it comes to a kind of an interview process. I think we're talking about a human level of kind of consciousness that
Yeah.
helps inform that decision-making process. So I think do I think it's plausible? Yes. Do I think it's do I think it's as near as perhaps some of the large kind of LLM providers and the vendors are talking about? No, I don't. Because
Right.
to your point, we're talking about agency, we're talking about autonomy, we're talking about a human level of kind of consciousness. So
Yeah.
I,
I'll tell
I
you,
don't.
I think when the people will build the tech
Mm,
thinking people want it, and when the tech appears, people are going to use it. I was on a panel thing with a bunch of like AI based kind of hiring leaders, and they were like of startups and stuff. There's a person like, we're going to have in the future, you're going to have 59 different agents doing all this stuff for you, making you a super employee. They're going to do all these things. And these people believe very strongly that this is the future, and they create the tech. And like I said, once the tech is there and they start hyping it and selling it, and
mm,
people are going to do it. People are going to do it. That to me is how I think that cycle might get broken. But I also do think, Glenn, that I don't think humans are going to be completely removed from this. I
yeah.
think what's going
Well,
to happen is you're going to be delivered 5 finalists to interview, and
yeah.
then the AI is going to help you make the decision. So
Yeah.
no time soon is a hire going to be made without some form of human to human contact.
Agreed.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so anyway,
Yeah. I mean, and to your point then, if we're talking about kind of individuals that can set up a business and run with 30 agents, what does that mean
yeah,
for the startup proposition?
yeah,
For
exactly.
I mean,
Well,
it kind of removes the need for the
I,
startup layer, right?
I read a thing a while back that was like, in the future, there are going to be AIs that create their own companies and hire other AIs or build other AIs to do this stuff, and that could
Yeah.
easily happen 20 years, whatever. I don't know. But the other thing, real quickly, to
Mm,
your, this is what I forgot to say. On that same call, they were basically talking about AGI. We're going to have AGI. These things, and I said, wait a minute, how do
mm,
you define AGI? Because people
mm,
throw that around all the time. These people are fully believable that your AI is going to be the same as a human
mm.
and be able to make human level decisions and such. To your point, and I was like, wow, okay, well, either I'm overly skeptical, or I
Yeah.
kind of think you guys are a little full of shit,
Yeah.
about AGI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's hype.
But you see, individuals like Sam Altman and that talking about AGI, the race to AGI, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
So, it seeps into the public consciousness, right? Because it's being kind of perpetuated by these individuals that are, kind of like building these
yeah.
frontier models. But to your point, it's kind of almost like, well, they may have a vision of the future, but it doesn't mean to say that it's here right now.
No,
Um,
you have to orient toward those things,
yeah,
though, right? I mean,
for
somebody
sure.
has to think we can put a man or a woman, whatever, on the moon, and then work toward it. But
Yeah.
it,
But I think
yeah,
Altman's kind of approach as well is really around the societal element
yeah. Oh,
of
sure.
kind of open AI. He was on I can't remember the name of the podcast, but he was asked a hypothetical question around a universal basic income, and
Yeah.
he kind of sort of said, "Well, as we're talking hypothetically, what if universal basic income was replaced by tokens?" So individuals were given kind of a level of tokens in
Yeah.
relation to kind of AI, and that was something that they traded. And
Oh, that's weird. That's
yeah, and
weird.
so when you start to sort of think about kind of like tokens as a currency,
Hmm.
and he was obviously talking hypothetically, but it was a very immediate answer to something that kind of was hypothetical. You know what I mean? You would expect some sort of pause, but he was straight in with like, yeah, well, if we could imagine a world where hypothetically tokens replaced or were a form of universal basic income and people could trade tokens, etc. I was just like, oh, yeah, I'm not too sure I'd like that future.
Yeah, no. Well, I talked to some people a while back about the concept that you reminded me of, distributed autonomous organizations, DAOs, where there is no central thing, and tokens are how people are evaluated and appreciated and all this stuff. And it's not exactly the same, maybe, but who knows what'll happen. But I don't. Everybody isn't going to want to subscribe to that.
Mm,
You're looking at this. I think a lot about stand-up jobs.
mm,
Jobs where until robotics is Star Wars level or whatever. I mean,
mm,
you're not going to have people laying bricks, although they do have 3D printed houses, but building. But
mm,
just think about it. There's, you're not going to have an AI fix your washing machine or
mm.
build you cabinets or something.
Yeah.
These are things that I think are becoming more attractive. I've already you know, worked a little with a couple startups where they're like, we know the workforce is going to move toward trades, HVAC, plumbing,
Mm,
electric. So we're starting now to recruit in schools, and we're starting now to really promote these as viable jobs for people and a viable career pathway. And I think that is separate from the AI side of things. And we have to
mm,
think about it. We get so very narrowly enclosed in the professional world where people are talking about this a lot. But,
mm,
I live in New Orleans. A lot of my friends are artists and musicians. Like
mm.
they maybe are starting to use ChatGTP a little bit, but a lot of people that I interact with don't talk about this kind of shit, right?
Yeah.
They just don't. So
Yeah.
we'll have a little bit of a myopic thing,
Mm.
about it.
Uh, Matthias, go.
Yes, since we talked about OpenAI, what is the sentiment around OpenAI creates their own hiring platform and they have
Yeah.
certifications in place? Is this somehow be a game changer or not?
I mean, they're going to do it. They're going to penetrate all kinds of different areas. I had this idea a while back of um, when is it going to be that you're using ChatGTP and job ads start popping up? Like, oh, you're talking a lot about science. You're obviously, because it knows everything about me for sure that I put into it, and uh, and I haven't done this yet, but I suggest everybody try it because I think it's interesting. If you use one of these models a lot, like I used ChatGPT for 3 years, ask it to draw a picture of you. How does it think that you look? I can't wait to do it. I haven't had time, but
Wow.
just kind of getting to the idea that it's going to know a lot about you. So it could start recommending jobs based on what other employers are putting into it.
Mm,
Within the workflow that you're doing already, if you toggle that on, do you want to see job advertisements?
mm.
They're going to start just like Google did, right? Google came on and Facebook came on and Amazon came on, Uber came on and started disrupting and penetrating more and more things.
Yeah.
Uber rides, Uber eats, Uber helicopters, whatever they're going to have. So
Yeah.
it's um it's inevitable if you ask me, and they got
Mm,
such a big user base that
mm.
I think it could turn up things over big time. And then it's like, how does the EEOC, how does the EUAI Act look at it? What
Yeah.
the hell?
Yeah.
I don't have any clue. It's going to get crazier and crazier, I'm telling you.
So I have like a, a I guess, Matthias, before you come in, a kind of final question from me, really, which is if we fast forward like 10 years, right, and we accept that AI is kind of embedded or is fundamental to all of the sort of TA and people tools and assessment tools that we're utilizing, what do we, what either kind of design principle, ethical consideration, or guardrail do we need to ensure is at the forefront of being baked into these systems now in your
Yeah,
one or the other, one or all three of them? What do we need to consider right now to protect almost how things are
yeah,
operating in 10 years time?
yeah. Just ways to continue to involve people and ways to continue understanding, again, the credibility of source, the credibility of reception, and some form of way to really believably validate that someone has skills as it gets more and more wide open like this. So that it, and I think the explainability, transparency piece of this is always going to be pretty difficult as it gets more complex. I think it's looking at the outcomes in a critical way. So collecting the data and crunching the data to say this is working, this is discriminating, against certain people. But it's going to get harder and harder and harder to do this. And as things get more and more efficient and effective, because they're getting more complex, I think it's going to be harder and harder to do. I don't even know that regulation, like we've been talking about, is going to get us fully there, to be honest. You have to enforce that regulation. That's difficult when everybody's using this stuff. It's very difficult. So.
Yeah. Matthias,
We
over to
need
you
to
to
keep
close.
talking about it like this, right? People need to keep thinking critically about it, and not just signing on, like we said, to the hype train of, okay, better use this. But when you put it in someone's face, they're going to use it. When you put matching technology into the ATS or into the platform you're already using, oh, here it is. This can help me. It's right here for me. You don't have to go acquire it. It's part of a bigger system, and it's right in your face, and it makes sense to try it and use it. And that's more and more what I think is going to happen, incrementally, slowly, until we don't even notice. I
Yeah.
think.
I think my kind of advice for people is, certainly when you're looking at kind of outcomes, is be an editor, not a reviewer. So don't be in a
Right.
situation where you're just kind of reviewing,
Wow.
accepting.
Nice. I
Be
like that.
be an editor. Be critically
Hmm.
assessing that outcome. You know
I'm
what I
going to
mean?
use that one. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I I keep asking myself the whole time, are we expecting too much of the human element to get this under control? Like, as much as I love this notion of critical thinking, and I'll ask yourself, ask your people, ask your network, ask your friends, the colleagues you work with, how many of them have that skill and are great at it, or applying it. So I would maybe go into another direction. Wouldn't it be somehow also a solution that the people who write these acts, policies, regulations, to come up with their own AI that is a plug and play to say auditing of what you have,
Right.
and then will self audit this, right? So that you be like, I pay 500 euros
Yep.
or dollars. I somehow have a setup here. Give me an audit and then tell me how to fix my problems, and it does this
Yeah.
automatically.
That'll happen. Yeah, that makes sense. You just got to be able to trust that it's actually knows your problem, right? There's
Exactly.
always a trust factor, no matter how you're using it. If you
True.
have one, soon, we've talk about it all the time. You have an AI applying for a job and an AI evaluating someone for the job, and like it's going to be more and more like that. So I think there's already companies that are setting that up, especially as compliance. It is an industry, although I think a lot of people who've set up those kind of businesses have had a little bit of trouble, getting traction. But as there's a need externally, like I think there is something there. So again, the people making the evaluation algorithms have to be involved in making those work properly. But you could do it now. You could just feed ChatGTP something and say, "Tell me about this," and I think it could do a pretty good job. But again, you don't want to just take that as, okay, I don't even have to look at anything else.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I need to do. And I think
Yeah.
that's kind of a change.
Amazing. What a fascinating conversation, Charles, and
Yeah, for
thank
sure.
you. I mean, it's one of those conversations, when you could just feel like it could just roll on, because there's
Oh
so
man, it's so
many
fun.
threads that we could kind of pull on in relation to
Yeah,
this. Um,
so fun.
but for now, thank you very much for being a
Hmm.
guest on Escaping the Echo Chamber. We will put all of your socials and references to your kind of content when we release the show. And we definitely encourage individuals, if this is the first time you've heard of or Charles has come onto your radar, get into his content, get reading. There's loads of valuable stuff in there that will really help you. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to try and find these trusted sources when it comes to our own kind of AI literacy and learning. And I would definitely advocate for Charles being one of those trusted sources, somebody with the kind of lineage and background, but the critical thinking that will help you on your own kind of AI journey, whether you're sitting in a seat as a TA or people leader. But yeah, Giles, thank you so much. Really
No,
appreciate
thank
you
you
being a
all for
guest.
having me. I appreciate you reaching out across the pond, and very nice, very enjoyable. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.